What's happening, guys? James Blonde here with MMOHuts.com, taking a first look at Ascend, Hand of Kull, a hybrid action RPG dungeon crawler from Signal Studios that recently found its way to the free-to-play section on Steam. Now, this game originally came out for the Xbox 360 last year, and it's also known as Ascend New Gods previously, and it's now being ported over to the PC. And so on the PC, it's still in beta, but anyone can hop in and try it out without a key. But the basis for this game is that you're a warrior called a Caos, created by the three gods to destroy the spawn of titans, so that one day one of these three gods can rule the world. So the concept overall is neat, and it seems to offer up a really cool single-player feel to a partially massively multiplayer game. And the game has some neat elements going for it, so I'll hop in and show you guys what the game has to offer. So of course, when you first start out the game, you are taken to the Sanctuary to create your Caos, which is this creepy giant guy that you see here. And the guys around him are actually humans, just to give you an idea how big your Caos is. Now, you're also given these souls, which is the in-game currency, to spend on outfitting and customizing your Caos. And some of these items are free, but the really cool stuff, like this one here, will cost you. And the only way to purchase them at this point is to buy more souls with real money. I could spend souls now to buy one of these cool looking faces to make my Caos look that much more badass, but believe me, it's not the best choice when it comes to spending your souls. But like I said, you can buy souls in order to purchase whatever gear you want. Now that right there kind of sounds pay to win, especially since the better weapons cost a lot of souls. But I can say that you're not exactly going up against other players directly in this game. The game is multiplayer, but you're not going up against them, you know, just regular PvP. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So you can change up your face, the skin, your hair, and you can pick your gear. But in case you're wondering, there are no female Caos, which I guess I wouldn't figure there would be in this sort of game. But you'll notice that your gear here is almost set up in tiers, getting better as you go up and also as you go up in price, of course. My recommendation for starting out is to pick out a decent set of armor, because you don't actually find it very often. You find other items in chests and whatnot that while you're venturing, but it gets pretty expensive if you have to buy it later on. I've got to admit, though, the gear in this game looks pretty sick. This is just the low-level stuff, and it already looks pretty badass. I look like an executioner. And the gear is really important in this game, but for now it's not super important on what you choose, because like I said, you get a chance to upgrade and pick up items along your way. And so after you've got your character decked out looking like a straight up executioner badass, you then choose your god to align with. Now, these guys here are the current overall leaders under each of the gods that you can pledge yourself to. You can choose the god of darkness, the god of void, or the god of light. Now, seeing that my character inspired me to look evil, I figured I'd follow through with the look, and I went with the darkness, which gives you greater damage and better armor overall, but the drawback to them is that they're slow moving and a little bit slower hitting, so it kind of sucks, especially if you choose some of the heavier weapons. And of course, their spells are based on fire. Probably guessed that. The Void, on the other hand, would have been my second choice. They focus on deceptive magic and evasion with spells based around ice. And of course, we have the Light alignment, which is all about speed and crit strikes. They use those lightning spells that stun their enemies, so this is the sort of play style customization that you get right off the start. And no matter which one you choose, you get specific perks towards your alignment. Now, once you've made your choice, your job is to spread your god's influence and convert the lands to your side. So that's one element in the game, is territory control. You want to keep the land worshipping your particular god. So the game puts you through a tutorial to kind of give you an idea how that works, and is also showing you your combo moves, and pretty much everything else in the entire workings of the game. Almost. Now, starting out, the combat is actually really fun. It's an action-style combat, similar to games like Dark Souls, for example. It's just not as complex as Dark Souls. But you might have noticed that I'm using an Xbox 360 controller to play, because the game actually has native support for it. Like I said, the game originated on the Xbox 360. But I would recommend it for a better overall game experience, just like I played Dark Souls 2 with a controller, and I don't really do it otherwise. But otherwise, I can't imagine the controls being too complicated with the keyboard and mouse, because the combos on the controller basically consist of X and Y, all the way going to, you know, X, 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 and Y. Just some variation of however many X's you want to put in front of the Y. Plus, every once in a while, you get the opportunity to do a finishing move, which looks really cool at the end of a combo. So they're not super elaborate, but it's enough to make the combat feel like a dungeon crawler, or a game like Vindictus or C9. And of course, combos are important in the game because once you get past a 10-hit combo, your soul multiplier increases. And believe me, in this game, it's all about getting the souls, which, like I said, is also the in-game currency used for everything. Like purchasing spells, for example. You can learn spells like this fireball here that help with enemies that tend to back up and keep their distance pretty much all the time. Or this AoE spike spell that stuns enemies and does damage over time. But oddly enough, the spells like these are the only way to do any sort of ranged damage. Out of all the badass weapons that they have, they're all melee weapons. However, if you do fight with the different weapons, if you switch your weapons out, you'll notice that it changes the fighting style and the way your combos end up working. It also changes the attack speed depending on whether or not the weapon is two-handed or one-handed, or if it's a mace versus a sword. So for example, the skull hammer here, you're going to see a slower sweeping and smashing type motion. And when I do a dash to heavy hit combo, it's a continued running dash opposed to a dash with an uppercut motion, like with this spiky one-handed mace, which is a much faster swinging weapon in the first place. But back to the spells for a minute. You can use souls to upgrade your spells like you can everything else. You can give your spells less cooldown time, you can add damage to them, or you increase their AoE, for example, on this one. You gain other spells by completing major story quests or beating bosses, and some of them have you align with different gods in order to unlock those spells, but I'll talk a little bit more about that and how you can do that later on. Now I've got to say, one of the coolest aspects of this game is the curses and blessings that you can put on other players in the game. So you can see other players, but they're kind of like this. They appear translucent, and they're different colors depending on what god they align with. But you can choose to interact with those players by banishing enemies to their parallel worlds. So the enemies that you're fighting, some of the enemies anyway, get put on them instead of you having to deal with them. So this is the simplest method of screwing with other players in this game. Now you can purchase different curses that cause more elite enemies to invade them, which is even more annoying. Or on the other hand, you can actually cast blessings on players that give them a buff, like a shield that helps them out. But I can also imagine you see a lot less of that happening. But you do get rewarded souls if the creatures you banish towards the other players do damage or kill them. And like I said, depending on which god you align with depends on what curses or blessings are available to you. So that's kind of like Dark Souls in that you can see other players in parallel worlds, but you never do fight other players directly in PvP like I mentioned before. Therefore, the fact that you can pay real money to buy souls for high-end weapons isn't exactly pay to win. It just keeps you from having to grind so much for those items. And truthfully, once you get better and start racking up combos, you can actually get souls pretty quick. But there's a catch to that. You just have to be careful and save as much money as you can because you're constantly having to repair your gear or upgrade it for that matter. And unfortunately, just like owning a really expensive sports car or something like that, the better the weapon or piece of gear, the more it costs to upgrade and or repair it. It's definitely not the most appealing part of the game, and the bad thing is, if you're not willing to pay real money, then you're going to have to grind a bit just to keep your gear in order. So the overall goal in the game, like I said earlier, is to spread darkness or void or light or whichever you choose over the land, and you do that by desecrating altars in these villages with all these little humans running around. You've got to kill their leader. You've got to show them who's boss, basically. And this is essentially how you capture territory in the game. And when you do so, you'll notice that the villagers actually become your worshippers, and they will help you fight enemies when they're around. Plus, you can actually take them with you by calling them. You start yelling in the air, and they just start climbing all over you. It's actually kind of cool, but at the same time, it's kind of weird. But once you've got humans all over you, they do serve a purpose. You can eat a few of them as a snack if you're low on health. You can also do that with enemy villagers. You just kind of have to catch them first. Plus, you can eat some of the animals that are grazing around in the area. You can throw the humans that are on you, which I haven't quite figured out a use for that yet, but it's entertaining either way. You can stomp on all the bad ones, also entertaining. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a funny element in the game, but it doesn't really serve that much of a purpose that I can tell so far. It is, however, cool because it does give you a sense of how gigantic you actually are, but not quite as well as when you see the Titan. These guys make you look the same size as the humans do to you in comparison. And just as the game tells you, you are no harm to them. Yet. So when you're going around pillaging villages, spreading your god's influence, you sometimes lose those spots that you've claimed and are called in to fight for them back. And you can choose to either accept or dismiss the challenge. Plus, if you have ascended Caos, you can send them to go fight that for you. But that's something I'll talk about in a second. This is as close to PvP you can actually get into the game, because you're not actually fighting another player, but you are fighting another player's avatar with AI put into it. These guys you fight are other players' ascended Caos. See, once you get to a certain point, you can choose to ascend your character, and this means recreating your Caos and possibly reselecting your alignment. But once you've done this, your character becomes an NPC and is able to fight your territories for you. So other players have to beat the ascended to essentially win over that territory. Now, I didn't quite get far enough into the game in order to see this actually happen, but I can say it's an interesting element in the game. It's kind of like Akaniro Demon Hunters, where you can choose other people's avatars to fight alongside you, and some of them can be pretty powerful. And of course, that's probably the most ideal time to ascend your Caos, is when you feel that you've become really powerful. However, you do have to meet certain requirements in order to ascend. But when you ascend, you get to choose one piece of gear to make a legacy item. And that item becomes a permanent item in your inventory, and you take it with you to your future Caos. So this is supposed to let you mix and match items, spells, and weapons from different alignments in order to create a unique, powerful new Caos. So later on, late game. And whenever your areas get invaded by other players, like I was saying earlier, you can select which Ascended Caos goes to fight them. So those are basically the ways you can affect other players in this game. So like I said, overall the game has some really cool ideas and elements which make it really fun to play. There's no doubt about that. But there are some elements that I just don't think will keep me wanting to play the game very long. And it's mainly due to the speed at which the gear breaks and how much it costs in order to keep that maintained. It's almost like the rich get richer in terms of souls in this game. When you have your gear and it's good, you can effectively do combos, maintain your health, and beat bosses, thus getting you a lot more souls. But if you get into the hole, like if you get into a spot where it's too costly in order to repair your gear, it all goes downhill from there. If you die, your gear takes a huge hit, and if you don't have a weapon, you do 0 damage. Literally 0 damage, and it takes so long to get those souls back up in order to repair that original piece of gear that went out in the first place, and by the time you get that many souls, something else needs repaired. If they had a different model to this game, then I can see it having a lot better replay value. Now, you can go back to the Sanctuary and visit the Forge in order to repair your gear for free. You just have to wait 2 days for it to repair without paying any souls. And here's another thing. Say you play the game and you get to the point where you can't afford to maintain your gear and you're in the hole that I was talking about. You can't start over from scratch. You can't delete your character, nor do you have any sort of multiple character slots to use. You literally have to make a new Steam account if you want to play the game with a fresh new start. Wonder why that is. Anyway, guys, the game is worth playing, there's no doubt about that, but it does have its drawbacks. This is one of those games that is really cool in concept, and it's fun to play. The combat style is great, the ideas behind it's great, the territory wars and all of that is great. Just the business model with the gear breaking and having to grind for in-game currency so hard is what deducts its points. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. If you want to try out the game yourself, it's free to play on Steam. I would still recommend playing it. It's really fun, like I said. But if you just want more information about the game, head over to the MMOHuts game profile from the link in the description below. And until next time, guys, that's going to be it for me. I'm James Blonde. See you out there, gamers.